Hey everybody, welcome to OK Everyday, a podcast about transactional analysis where we, Jason and I, dive into how make our lives okay every day. Hi Jason.
Hey, Ollie.
And today we're talking about
Ego states. Or one thing we're going to look at is ego energy, which is the title of this one in particular. But you'll hear us talk a lot about the word ego states.
yes, and now Jason, I will give it up to you. What the hell is that?
What is this thing called ego state or ego energy? Well, actually, when I'm explaining it in a workshop or online or talking to people, I talk about ego. Ego is just a fancy word for self. It's just the ancient
Mhm.
Latin word for self. We talk about our ego getting in the way. It's just self. Okay. Um, but our self changes depending on what's going on in this particular situation, right? We're still ourselves, but the energy can be different in different situations. For example, how I am at an important meeting in work might be different to how I am in the pub with my friends, might be different to how
Mm.
I am with my family. I'm still Jason,
Hmm.
but something is slightly different. My energy is different at different times. And pretty much that's what happens throughout the day constantly. So we're energy beings, and the energy shifts throughout the day based on what's going on outside of us. So in the
Mhm.
situation, in reality, and then inside of us in terms of how we're responding to that. Right. So ego state, as we look at, is just naming where that energy is at any particular time based on what's going on outside and inside of ourselves.
Wow.
And Ollie, I think you actually have some definitions from Mr. Byrne.
From the man
The
himself,
man
yes.
himself who
From
came up with
from
the
I
phrase,
got it. As you mentioned, I got a really technical book.
the games people play.
And on the first pages, actually on the in the first chapter, one of the definitions here, in a given individual, a certain set of behavior patterns correspond to one state of mind, while another set of behaviors is related to a different psychic attitude. And these changes and differences give the rise to the idea of ego states.
Mm,
That's the definition. I mean, it's a pre-definition to be honest, but
yeah,
it gives the foundation to ego states. And in the next paragraph, what he says, in more practical terms, it's a system of feelings accompanied by a related set of behavior patterns. Right.
right.
So each ego state is accompanied by a set of pattern, a set of not paternal, but a set of behaviors.
Yeah, set of patterns, absolutely. And that's as we get into this, it'll make more sense because it's the patterns actually that give away what's going on in any particular ego state. Right. So there's
Right.
different ego states, and the pattern of behavior will kind of give it away. So Byrne was talking there about behavior and kind of parts of the mind, because he did mention mind, right? And then
Right.
also feelings and how they relate to patterns of behavior. So it's
Mm.
thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that lead to certain patterns that we develop, right? That
Hmm.
we pick up. And of course, we're creatures of habits. So we get into these habits, we learn these habits, and we learn how to express ourselves from the different parts of our ego states. So I often imagine,
Mm.
if you think about mind, for example, so you think about the brain, if you're going to a bit of neurobiology, we have these synapses, right, that fire off in patterns, right, and they connect and build and grow over time. So, for example, if I was to say the word horse, you'd think of a particular horse. Now, I'll think of a different horse. Yours might be brown, might be white, one might be Clydesdale or something else. We both have this concept horse, but it's slightly different. What that means is a certain pattern is fired off in our brain. And when it comes to behavior and growing and developing, um, we learn certain behaviors based on the people we're around. So
Hmm.
when I think of, say, if I think of the word dad, a certain pattern will fire off in my head, and a certain pattern will fire off in your head. And associated with that word will be certain behaviors that I saw and heard and experienced in relation to that particular word, which is a little bit more complex than, say, horse. Right? So when I think dad, I think different, more stuff's going on there because I had more interaction with my dad, and more patterns developed. So,
Wow.
and they're now part of me and part of my ego energy. So
Hmm.
these patterns that we're looking out for and spotting. What do you think of all that?
There's a lot, to be honest. I mean, the first thing that came to mind when you were talking about ego energy was roles. So that
Right.
we play different, or we have different roles depending on the context that we're in. So we can, again, we can be
Absolutely.
parents, we can be partners, we can be friends, we can be co-workers, multiple roles. And it's interesting. I'm assuming that the ego states would change based on these roles, or
Aha.
we might be changing or not. What would you say?
Absolutely. Or we might be accessing uh, a particular part of our ego state on a
Oh,
regular basis. You know, say for
right.
example, how I am in work, or if I'm a manager or leader, I'll be accessing a particular type of behavior and patterns more often than I
Mhm.
would in a different situation. So we do pick up these patterns that we've learned, not just from the people we're close to, but society as well. Society will
Mhm.
kind of feed into our ego states, and we tap into this energy at different times. And one of the things that we can look at is how do you recognize it? How do you recognize an ego state? That was one of the keen things, one of the few kind of really important things that transactional analysis brought to psychology. Is, you
Mhm.
know, it's a lovely word, ego state, but how do you know something's happened? So you can actually start to spot these ego states in
Mhm.
life, like in terms of being with others, in work, at home, being with ourselves. Yeah. So would you, what do you think of that? What do you think about spotting an ego state?
Ooh, well, I definitely can spot roles and I can
Yeah.
spot my behaviors within those roles. And if
Right.
if I just change that within the ego state, and the funny thing that came to mind was sometimes depending on the role and ego energy or ego states
Yeah.
that I'm,
Yeah.
the behaviors can be contradictory.
Okay.
As in, I can be, say, in one role, I could be a bit more patient, and in the other role, I'd be not really patient at all.
Yeah, exactly. Well
And
spotted.
and the intent would be kind of, it wouldn't be a malice intent, you know.
No.
So say I'm rehearsing with my friends in a band, I could say something without thinking about it, and I know they won't take it in a bad way.
Yeah,
Whereas at work, I'd have to watch what I'm saying
that's right.
because it's a different context. I've got a different role, and we have a different relationship with the people that I'm working with.
Absolutely. So there's an element there of performance, for example, in different
Mm.
ways. So in the band, you're still performing. In work, you're performing, but there's different kind of situational context that you might feel more relaxed in one, in terms of being able to kind of express yourself from a particular part of your ego state,
Mm.
than in another. Right? And that's what happens. That's in terms of these patterns. We do we need to learn some of this at some stage. So we figure out actually, yeah, this is how it works. This is the role I'm supposed. If you think about back in school, so how am I
Mm.
supposed to be a good pupil, right? You know, so I need to learn that role, right? What's being reinforced from the teachers and mom and dad and whoever else. So that then feeds into my ego energy,
Mm.
so that I
Okay.
know that, okay, if I stand up and throw stuff around, I'm going to get in trouble. You know, but if I sit down and listen and do my work, then I don't get in so much trouble. So, boom, okay, I'll update, or just naturally, my part of my ego state, updates with that information based
Right.
on behavior patterns.
You know what? I actually want to share a case. Basically, we had 15-20 minutes ago, just
Yeah,
preparing
yeah.
for this episode, and you asked me back what I think the ego states were, and I was, well, not literally, but kind of mentally sweating, as in, what if I get this wrong and we're gonna record this episode, and what's gonna, so that were the thoughts that were going through my mind. But I shared at the end, I shared back, like I felt like, I know I wasn't, but I felt like I was on an exam or some kind of test. Did I pass? It's like,
I mean, and I think that's such a brilliant example, because there it was live between us. Like we know each other well, and but right then and there, boom, something happened that you felt like, oh, this is an exam. I'm being asked a question and I could get it wrong. And of course, that then triggered a whole set of kind of energy that
Right.
wasn't there a moment ago, when we were just chatting. It wasn't until I asked the question, then Josh, all of a sudden it got shifted. That is a brilliant example of how to recognize a shift within
Mm,
an ego state. So, a couple of the things that Byrne and transactional analysis talks about is you can recognize an ego state by the behavior. So tap into the energy. So what are, what are the words saying? What are the gestures? What's the tone? Did a person's face change? So there's all these little clues. Now, Ollie, you were sharing you open. I didn't spot it, but you fed it back to me that douche, there was this change of energy going on inside of you. So that's one way to spot an ego state or a change in an ego state, because something will actually change.
I'm good at not showing this.
Well, now we'll talk about that in a second in
No, but
terms of what can go on outside and what can go on inside.
true. And when you were reflecting back, it came. I wanted to come back to the question you actually asked initially: is how can you spot the ego states or the shift in energy? And that was one of them, is basically by sharing what just happened, saying through verbalizing what just happened. I remember a long time ago, again, I wasn't aware of TA at the time, but some time ago it was more of a habit that I just kind of wrote down everything I thought, maybe at the end of the day, maybe kind of during the day. And it kind of, I remember thinking, okay, this changed. I didn't think of ego states at that time. I was more thinking this changed, this
Mm-hmm.
happened. But it helped me see any changes or spot something that was going on. Maybe in a sequence of days, something was repeating itself time and
Yeah,
time again.
brilliant, brilliant.
You know.
And that whole process was raising your self-awareness.
Mm,
So you were slowing down to take the time to see what was changing for you over a period of time. And that now we can kind of put ego states onto it if you want to, right?
right.
As a theory, but really you were developing self-awareness. And that's part of why Byrne kind of brought ego states to the forefront, is to help develop self-awareness, how to spot these
Mm,
patterns, and kind of reinforce the ones you want to do, the type of behavior you want to do, and then work on the ones you don't, because they may have consequences. So, for
right.
example, another way to spot an ego state, or that there's something going on, is there's a way to view it socially. So what's the impact I'm having on somebody else?
Mm,
If I'm seeing that, whatever I'm saying or doing is having, I can see they look worried,
right.
then it's like, okay, how am I coming across that's causing them to feel worried? There's something going on here. That's one way to get an idea that, okay, am I, is there something about my behavior that's affecting that person in that way?
Mm,
Now, in particular, in a group, if you imagine a team, like if the whole team are looking at me really, really worried and very, very quiet, or angry and frustrated, it might be something that I'm doing that's having this effect on these five different people, for example.
mm.
So there's a social element to spot an ego state. Does that make sense?
It does. It does make sense. And at the same time, there's the other side of the coin. I don't know why it came up in my mind as well, is that it's just even asking about how am I coming across? And I think we had this
Brilliant.
conversation in the earlier episodes, even by just being aware about what kind of reaction you have on the other what reaction the other person has to the words that you say, and just asking that. So kind of not only observing what's happening, but also if say I see you're sad, I would ask you, I see you're sad. Am I reading this right? What's
Mhm.
up? Is there any way I can help?
Yeah. Or is there
And then
anything
we have a
that I'm
discussion about it.
doing
Yeah,
that
is
is
there
this?
anything I'm doing?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, that's brilliant. Again, that's developing self-awareness, is actually putting it out there and asking. Yeah, because we don't know until
Mm.
we ask. The other couple of ways that we can spot an ego state, again, we're talking about an ego state at high level, because there are names to particular ego states, which we'll cover off in further episodes. But another way of kind of, if I want to find out what ego state I'm in or what's going on inside of me, I might go, okay, I just said something in a certain way. Does that remind me of anybody?
Mm.
right? Because I might be acting out in a way that I observed somebody else acting out. And I may or may not want to be doing that. So a good question is, who does that remind me of,
Mhm.
right? If I'm talking, but also if somebody's impacting me,
Right.
right? If somebody else is in an ego state and they're kind of, let's say, talking at me, for example, instead of with me, and it's starting to intimidate me, then I go, why am I being intimidated by this, by how this person's talking? And then I can think, well, who does he remind me of? Or reminds me of that teacher who used to always give out to me. Okay, so well, okay, he's not that teacher, but it's making me feel like that, right?
Mm.
And I'm not that kid. I've got lots of experience, and I'm a 50-something-year-old man, so I don't have to react in that way. But it's by me developing that self-awareness by asking that question. What's going on here? Why am I feeling like this? Yeah,
But even by that example you just shared, maybe hypothetical, maybe not, but it resonates with what I encountered just preparing to this session. And maybe that was the question that I could have asked myself is like, what just happened? So who did Jason remind me of at
yeah,
this particular time? Was it a teacher? Was it my parents? Was it someone else? Was it my big brother who was standing in front of me and saying you have
yeah,
to do your homework? Like, who was the person, and why am I reacting in that way? Why is that my reaction versus just kind of laughing it off, saying, "Oh, I think this is that, this is that," you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
And
And isn't it interesting? Do you know what I mean?
it
Like
is.
it's just because I might have asked that question in a way that looked or sounded or something gesture I did that did remind you of somebody from your past, right? So I just this stuff is so interesting to get into because
Right.
finally the last one where you can spot or at least kind of work with an ego state is what's known as, that's a big word, phenomenologically, right? So what's going on inside of me? Where am I feeling it? Type thing. Am I, boom?
Mm,
Why is my stomach just got twigged? Why is my heart rate gone up? What's going on?
mm,
Physiologically, that this situation has triggered because somehow there's something going on in this situation that's that's having a phenomena on me,
mm,
and uh, it's more likely from the past. So
right.
I want to be aware of not bringing stuff from the past into the present just because I feel a certain way,
Mm.
like, oh,
Wow.
that person made me really angry. Well, actually, they didn't, but they reminded you of a situation where you felt really, really angry. So if you look back on the video, if it was recorded, that person wasn't doing an awful lot to evoke that much anger, but something went on for you,
Mm.
so it helps kind of um, allow a way in to explore behavior is actually one of the things it does, or consistent patterns of behavior.
What I heard you say there is that sometimes our reaction is a reaction to a projection from the past, basically from a far past.
Literally, yes, it can be. So,
It
which means
shouldn't
it's not
always be, but
present
it
day
could be, right?
stuff. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So
Right.
that's a what often you might feel this, in different parts of life, particularly in work, when somebody reacts very, very dramatically, and
Mm.
it quite outweighs what's just gone on. And you think, what, how did that blow up? Because it looked like things were going fine, and then boof, something just went, and the
Mm.
the weight of emotion is much higher than
Right.
what was kind of being discussed in the meeting, for example.
Yeah, I think I can even relate to from a personal perspective, slightly, as we recently even had this conversation with my wife, and I said a word which didn't mean an awful lot to me, but it meant an awful lot to her.
Right. Yes.
And it's as you said, if you say dad, we would have a different interpretation or a different visual image of the same persona.
Yeah.
It's the same word, but it's a very different image for both of us. And
Yeah.
it's the same with that particular word. I think it was the word deserve, and
Mm.
it was a very different for my wife. It triggered a very kind of reaction of why are you saying this word to me? And for me, it was like it's just a word. I didn't mean anything. No context was meant by this. And but well, after we talked about it, it was interesting to see. Okay, so we have a different perception of words,
Yes.
and that's sometimes it can go so deep so quickly, but it's the reaction is instantaneous. So sometimes you just don't even have time to react properly to that particular moment unless you kind of ask the question, so what's going on here?
Yeah, so that's a brilliant example because that's ego states live in the moment. Something's gotten triggered, and you know, words can do this.
Mm,
Just single words, um, separate from how the person actually meant them, can trigger something for somebody else based on how they interpret that word.
right.
Right now, of course, we're not. None of us are perfect, so we can't go around just keeping an eye on our words all the time and think, "Oh, I can never get this wrong." No, no. It's about what do we do when it comes up? So what did I just say, and what just happened there, and what was that like for you? And oh, okay. So now I'm kind of building a relationship with the person based on, in this case, ego states. Because something I noticed you went quiet when I
Mm,
said that, right? Um, what's going on? Did I say something? You know? And then they
mm,
go, oh yeah, okay, well you said this. Okay, okay. So now I know what went on inside.
true.
So it's a very fascinating concept, I think, ego states. And the funny thing is, and we might be running out of time, but sometimes we may be in a one ego state
Mm.
externally, so we might be showing somebody we're interested, but internally we're bored out of our head, right? So there's a mismatch, and we'll look at that in later episodes. Uh, well, actually, our viewers might be doing it right now. I'm going to stick this out until the end, but I'm bored out of my head. So there's a mismatch of ego states there. Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Yeah, I really liked your episode.
Thumbs up. Not. But anyway. So I think that's a good insight into what can happen with ego states. They're quite interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And before we wrap up, I think one thing that popped to mind, I just wanted to share that observing these ego states and changes of behavior is a super powerful tool for, well, just as a human being, to be honest, but also if you're a coach or if you're a manager, I think that's a very powerful tool just to note these things. And sometimes when you're in a session with a person you coach, you can ask, "Oh, I've seen this shift of behavior. Tell me more. What just happened?
Mm-hmm.
What just went on?" And you can. It's the same for a manager as well. You might have said something, or something might have been talked about. Something might have happened. I've seen your reaction to this was slightly different than I expected. So tell me more. What's up?
Yeah, lovely. And that's the genius of Eric Byrne. He brought it right down to right now.
Mm,
Something just happened right now. Let's
right.
talk about it. Let's make sense of it. It's like, wow, brilliant. Love it.
So, Jason, how do you think we've progressed with ego states?
Yeah, I think, well, I hope actually that we've laid a good foundation because we're going to talk more about them in the next number of episodes. We're going to break them down into even more specific types of ego states. Like today, we were just talking about in general, what's the concept of ego state or ego energy? So I think it set us up well for the next session to look at one particular ego state.
I think that was the challenge for today, and we managed it. We managed not to name those other ego states. I did not believe that that was possible, but we did manage it. Jason,
Aren't we good?
congratulations. So good. So, dear viewers, dear listeners, thank you for being with us on this episode of OK Everyday, where Jason and I talked about ego states without going specific into any of the ego states. Ooh, very good. If you do like the video, please press the like button or share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're interested in more TA content, amazing. Click the subscribe button and you will be informed of new OK Everyday episodes coming out in the near future. In any case, we really hope that you stay okay
Every day.
every day.